Hello and welcome to the Midweek Check-in. It's good to see you. We've talked about discipleship recently and suggested that the Great Commission, spoken by Jesus just before he ascended into heaven, is a useful starting point for discussion. What is our main thing? The main thing over the past 15 months has been adapting to a new world. Everything's changed, and so our focus, our main thing, has been hijacked by world events. Every time we enter a shop, for example, we behave differently. We put a mask on and edge our way around other shoppers. The difference between now and a year last March is astonishing, and so our main thing has understandably changed. Our living patterns have changed over this period as well. We joke about not fitting into our uniform, but this masks a deeper issue. We think about slotting back into the same Salvation Army behaviour as pre-pandemic, and we wonder. 15 months is a long time, a period in which we've all forged new habits. Maybe fitting into our uniforms is the least of our concerns. How do we fit back into the pre-pandemic programme? We can't, because we're different people now. The reason for these somewhat uncomfortable questions is, what's your main thing at the moment? I don't need a Jesus-y answer. I think the best service we could possibly provide for the kingdom is to bring back honesty and vulnerability when we return. Your main thing might be safety concerns. It might be health. It might be family concerns. All these things and more besides fill our minds. And it's easy to get to the place where we feel like we're drowning. The stuff of the world crowds in. It's designed to. Our momentary cares and concerns conspire to overwhelm and cripple us so we can't think straight. That's what the world does. We lose perspective, which is why I ask the question, what's your main thing at the moment? We need to be honest with ourselves so that we can see when we've taken our eye off the ball. You've got to understand that we all live in perpetual denial, and that fessing up to this particular problem is the start of our healing. When my main thing is the wrong main thing, I'm going to end up worrying. I'm going to end up taking the problem away from Jesus and trying to fix it by myself because I don't trust him to do it right. Sheffield Band used to be seated on the platform for Sunday meetings, which meant that I had the perfect view of people as they came forward to the mercy seat. More importantly, I could see how they got up from that place of prayer. All your anxiety, all your care, come to the mercy seat. The hardest faith action is to pray about something and then let it go. You know the anxiety verse, I'm going to say it anyway. Do not be anxious about anything, but in everything, by prayer and petition with thanksgiving, present your requests to God. And the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. We live in perpetual denial. It's why we're anxious. Paul puts it like this, for all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. Whether we've been saved for 7 minutes or 70 years, the diagnosis and prognosis is still the same. We do fall short, and we're given the remedy. We're justified freely by his grace. The key to unlock freely available grace, there's a paradox for you, is humility and vulnerability. Let me take another run at it. Grace is freely available, but not if we persist in hiding from ourselves and pretending we don't have a problem when we do. Fessing up, not living in denial, Being brave enough to say that my main thing at the moment is selfish is a great start. It's hard to even do just that bit, but when we've got over that difficult hurdle, there's still more to come. This is where we've got to thus far. The main thing is discipleship. We're to work out how we can, as a fellowship of believers, dig ourselves deeper. Jesus said, "I'm all powerful." So you go and make disciples, teaching them to obey everything I have commanded you. This is your job as well as mine. You are to teach others obedience. That's the main thing. But if we're into denial, not easily able to face up to our own shadow, if we're squeezed into the world's mould without really knowing it or admitting to it, then our main thing definitely won't be obedience or teaching it. The main thing is obedience through deepening discipleship, and my main thing needs to be brought into line with that. That's where we are. Cue the lectionary for this weekend. We all know the story of David and Goliath. We all know it on a Sunday school level and from a more adult perspective. With all that knowledge, I still want you to allow something new. Such an attitude takes humility and vulnerability. And since we're being asked to use both as we return, it's a good chance to practice. Young lad Dave has the job of a shepherd cause he's too young to be conscripted for the war effort. One day he's given an exciting job to do. Dad Jesse says, "Leave the sheep and go take these cheese sandwiches for your brothers on the front line." He did as he was told, found his brothers and asked what was going on. As he was talking, big boy Goliath gets trundled out to stand between the two armies. He makes his threats and the army of God has no reply. Israel versus the Philistines. Dave takes one look at the setup and says, "Who does this Philistine think he is?" Big brother Eliab says, "Get back to your sheep, little one. This is grown-up stuff." What's happening here in terms of keeping the main thing the main thing? How is discipleship being deepened? Saul was king. He was the first Israelite king. He was learning on the job, so he needed to know that, as well as being a good fighter, he had to be a good prayer too. Military strategy in subservience to faith in God is the main thing. The strategy should have been trusting God first, work out what He wants you to do, act on that knowledge, and you'll have victory. That's keeping the main thing the main thing. Saul and his army along with him were squeezed into the world's mould, good and proper. They took one look at Goliath and said, "No way, we can't fight him, he's too big." The main thing at this point is fear. The main thing is self-preservation. Because Saul hadn't prioritized relationship with God as the main thing, the challenges came along and he found that he was rudderless. He's up the creek without a paddle. He hasn't got a clue. His military strategy, his answer to this dilemma, verse 25. The king will give much money to whoever kills him. He will also let whoever kills him marry his daughter, and his father's family will not have to pay taxes. A princess and a tax rebate. That's your strategy? Listen, we're involved in the same battle. We're fighting against nameless monsters that we're afraid of. They're nameless because, as we've already said, we're in denial. We don't like to talk about our shadow, so it remains large and in charge. Let's fix our eyes on Jesus. Unless we become practiced at sensing when our shadow side tries to take over, we'll be powerless to fight it. Here's a clue. When we experience fear, rejection, anxiety, jealousy, and the like, check to see if you're relying on Jesus or your own nous. David walks into the middle of this anxiety-ridden, fear-filled moment. Young Dave, too young to fight, too inexperienced to know what's what, stands before the king and says, "Don't let anyone be discouraged. I'll go and fight this Philistine." When our eyes are on the problem and not Jesus, when our brains are tired out by anxiety and fear, the right answer, the God solution, will always sound stupid. Always. Deepening our relationship with Jesus and teaching others to do the same is the main thing. But don't we need to attract more people? Don't we need to get more young families involved? Before you think about responding, check whether it's your shadow or the Spirit that's answering. Eyes on Jesus or squeezed into the world's mould? 'Cause the answer to the main thing question sort of tells us where our focus lies. Thanks for listening. More on this at the weekend. God bless you. Stay safe. Thank you.